But I'm going to make my first predictions for the 12-team playoff in college football coming up this season. So as we all know, the college football playoff expanded from 4 teams now to 12. So I'm going to give you, in order, the rankings that these teams make and who I think is going to be in the final 12 competing for the national championship. Now, I was a big fan of college football expanding the playoff. No matter who you talk to, no matter how many teams there are, there's always going to be teams that feel like they got jobbed. Florida State, we all know that you felt like you got jobbed, but then you lose by 60 to Georgia in the Orange Bowl. So how good were you really? Even with all your players, if they all played, you probably still get smashed by 30 to Georgia. So in ranking them 1 through 12, the number 1 seed I think is going to the Alabama Crimson Tide. I think they're going to have a great year. Jalen Milroe back at quarterback. He proved at the end of the year last year that he will be a star quarterback in college football. You know, he's young, he was raw. You know, Michigan was just a better team. That's why they beat them in the Rose Bowl. But I think Bama has a big-time bounce-back year. Kalen DeBoer, first-time head coach in Alabama. You know, first season at Bama since Nick Saban retired. Now, a lot of people thought Nick Saban leaving, Bama would take a couple steps back. I don't think so. I think Bama is still stacked. They're still ready to go. I'll take Jalen Milroe and the Alabama Crimson Tide to get the first seed. And I think they win the SEC in the process. Number 2, the Ohio State Buckeyes. As much as I have dogged the Buckeyes and Ryan Day, the schedule matches up for them. Their talented roster goes up against anybody in the Big Ten, and they beat everybody in the Big Ten. So I think they win the Big Ten, and based off polling and ranking positions, I think Ohio State gets the 2nd seed. Georgia gets the 3rd seed. I think Georgia and Bama, those two are always going to be duking it out for the SEC. I think Bama usurps Georgia this year. Now, I'm not saying Georgia is terrible, but I think they get the 3rd seed. Number 4, Texas. The Longhorns, led by Quinn Ewers, I think they get the 4th seed. Oregon at number 5. I think the Ducks will still be very viable. I know Bo Nix is not there anymore. He's with the Denver Broncos now, but I still think Oregon is so well coached and so well run. I think they'll be fine, and I think they'll propel themselves to one of the 12 spots. Number 6, University of Miami. I may be biased, but the schedule lines up for them. The roster lines up for them. I think this is the year Miami finally gets over the hump and makes the college football playoff. Now, in the previous system, they would have been one of the first 2 out. Now, I think they clinch the 6th seed, and I think they do win the ACC this year. Followed behind them, Florida State. As much as I love to dog Florida State, they still always have talent. They're never not viable in the ACC and on the national level, really. So I think Miami and Florida State, same thing with Georgia and Alabama, how those two are going to duke it out for the SEC. I think Miami and Florida State duke it out for the ACC. I think Miami finally gets back in the national spotlight at the 6th seed, but I also think Florida State, they're still going to be very viable with DJ Uiagalelei at quarterback, the transfer from Oregon State, former transfer from Clemson. I think they propel themselves to the 7th seed. Number 8, Oklahoma. Dylan Gabriel. Oklahoma has always been viable, and they're still viable. No matter what, Oklahoma is always viable. So I think they clinch. Penn State, another Big Ten team that is always viable. I think with Michigan taking a step back, the departure of John Harbaugh, the departure of so many starters on the Michigan team from the national championship team a year ago, I don't necessarily think that Michigan can handle with the rest of the Big Ten this year. I do think Penn State is built for this. Do I think they'll beat the Buckeyes in the regular season? Maybe. If it's a whiteout game, maybe. But Penn State is always viable in the Big Ten, so I think they clinch the number 9 seed. Baylor, another team clinching the 10 seed. They're always viable. They're always, feisty. They always have a good offense. I think Baylor, because when you get to the bottom, 9 through 12, you can make an argument for literally any team, hovering around the top 15 teams in college football. So the last three are kind of like long shots, but right now I'll choose Baylor. Number 11, I'll pick the USC Trojans. They're still going to be viable. Lincoln Riley's not going anywhere. He's still one of the best college football coaches out there. Probably one of the top 3 coaches in all of college football, if we're being honest. But, the lack of talent on the defensive and offensive side that went to the NFL, especially Caleb Williams, Heisman Trophy winner, went first overall to the Bears. So USC takes a step back, but I still think it's enough to clinch the 11 seed. And out of pocket, the 12th seed, I'll put my faith in Colorado. I'll get back on the Deion Sanders hype train. I think he will right the ship a little bit with his son, Shedeur Sanders. And I think Shedeur Sanders is going to have a Heisman-like kind of year. I think Colorado clinches a playoff berth in this year's college football 12-team playoff. Albeit the 12 seed, you got to start in one direction and just keep going there. You got to build baby steps. Can't just ask for it all at once if you're Colorado and Deion Sanders. So, with Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter, a better offensive line, more skill guys to add on the defense and offensive sides, I think Colorado pushes their way to the 12th seed, clinching the final spot in the college football playoff.